Have you ever been to a different country and noticed that they use a completely different payment system than what we use? Now, why is this so? Now, I think this boils down into three factors. The economic and financial factors, which obviously influences our money choices. And then what people don't really expect is the social and cultural impacts, as well as the political and historical impacts. So today, I'm going to break down these three factors one by one and then give specific examples to show how they actually influence people's decisions. So first of all, I wanted to start in the United States here. You can see in this diagram people's preferences and different reasons why people decide to use credit cards. Now, the most common reason why people use it, as you can see in this diagram, is because of the cashback and rewards which is offered to them. Now, if you have a credit card or if your parents use it, you know that these are really important for us. You can have like 2% or 1% cashback for anything. Now, this is deeply rooted in our economic system. It shows how people use these things, which isn't like prevalent across the entire world. And other reasons why people decide to use credit cards is, as you can see here, another significant reason is safety against fraud. Now, payment fraud and then transaction errors occur, which is pretty common. So people decide to use these credit cards to help them protect them. For example, if your credit card got stolen, you can simply contact or call customer service of your credit card company, and they could simply just cancel your credit card without you having the risk of losing any money or so. Now, this is quite different. For example, I will use Europe as an example. You can see here in the broad scheme that credit cards have been ever since increasing in the United States, but they're not that commonly used in Europe in comparison. Now, why is this so? One reason is the protection against fraud, which I mentioned. People rely less on credit cards and then more on government. In Europe, there's this thing called the Payment Services Directive, or PSD2, which is a European Union and more government-backed protection against fraud, rather than having private companies like Visa or MasterCard protecting you. And then I wanted to go across the world and travel to Asian countries. For example, in Japan, this is a photo of Japan, and China too. There's lots of super apps or payment apps that are used, as opposed to having traditional credit cards or even checks or anything, because people value more of the fast-paced lifestyle and the convenient payment methods in order to get this done. And now moving on, I want to talk about the political factors that come in play, as well as the historical ones. These two will be discussed together. So one example of political is the fact that countries now are trying to push for their own monetary sovereignty by controlling their own payment system. An example here is a quote that I pulled from Piero Cipollone in a recent event. Oh, by the way, he's an executive member of the European Central Bank. This was one event in the European Central Bank in which he said, quote, "We need to make sure central bank money remains fit for a digital world and thereby safeguard Europe's monetary sovereignty in a digital world." Now, this represents a breakthrough in which countries are trying to establish their own monetary sovereignty, as opposed to relying on foreign networks like Visa or MasterCard, which are American-based and they're applied to the whole world. And then this graphic gives you a visual perspective of how many different domestic payment solutions each European country is adopting right now. Besides that, there's also government-backed legislations and policies that have since affected these. For example, in Italy, in 2012, they set a limit of cap of 1,000 euros of cash transactions. Anything above that will be considered illegal and subject to penalties and fines. They did that because they wanted to avoid money laundering and bribery. And now if you look at it, I think it's around, the bar has been raised to 5,000 euros, but still, there is still a limit which limits people's usage of cash in that country. And because of that, it's pretty obvious to think that, which has happened, that credit cards and debit cards have ever since increased because people are more incentivized to use them instead of cash. And this is also, and then apart from that, historical factors also come at play. For example, take Germany as an example. You can see that Germany cash usage is much higher than the UK's. Now, why is this so? One example of what economists have known, is that Germany was also influenced in World War II, and people have the trauma or the experience of hyperinflation, so people wanted to have more control over their own money and assets. And in a study that showed that the average German carries around 107 euros, which is 3 times the amount of what an average French person would carry. And when asked, these people stated that they did this because they have a sense of security and anonymity. And then finally, I wanted to shift focus into the social and cultural impacts. For example, take the United States. When I was researching on this topic, I came across an interesting statistic which showed that about 42% of American respondents indicated that they preferred a physical receipt at the moment of purchase. And within that 42% category, 64% indicated that the reason they did this is because they feel more secure and validated when they have a physical receipt, as opposed to having other forms of receipts that are used nowadays, such as receipts via email or texting. Now, this goes to show into play how some of these little nuances and little people's preferences can come away into people's methods of habits of payment. And then in Japan, a study showed that in 2018, about 82% of transactions were processed via cash. This one reason is because of how safe Japan is as a country. The low crime rates give people less incentives to store money in a safer space, so people have more freedom to use it openly. But however, things changed during COVID when the demand for contactless payments soared because people were concerned about sanitary issues. So this also shows how global trends and impacts can influence people's choices in paying for money. And then ever since then, digital payment systems have been widely adopted in Japan, as opposed to having cash being the predominant form before. But despite all of these differences, there is a growing trend in the world right now, which is digital wallets. Digital wallets is really important in our world right now, and it is a growing trend right now. Previously, I mentioned the receipts, but in the age group of 18 to 24 years old, which is the younger generation and the future of the world, most of those people noted that they preferred having the digital receipts, which shows that there is a difference in the trend among the people. And it likely shows that in the future, we might be heading towards a more homogeneous form of payment. As you can see in this graphic, there are a bunch of different digital wallet payment systems across the world right now, which also goes to show that there possibly is going to be a trend of replacing all these cards and using your phones or digital wallets to pay for things. And then I also included this statistic to show how the projected digital wallet usage in European countries is projected to increase. As you can see here in the UK, Germany, Spain, and Italy, all of these are the important economic contributors to the European economy. All of these data, the proportions are expected to almost double, if not even more. So this shows also how in major economic bodies, the projected use of digital wallets will increase, so we are likely headed towards a more homogeneous form of payment in the future. Now, to sum up, even though there are many differences, there are still different shared traits that we have. So whenever you go to a different country in the future, and you notice that they have a completely different form of payment system, just keep in mind that this specific habit is based off a myriad of factors. You can have the political factors, historical, cultural, social, and etc. Many of these come into play to determine why people pay the way they do. So it's not just a basic phenomena. There are many different reasons to it. So also applying this to life, we should know that there are many different factors that come in play to make a seemingly simple decision have lots of different influences. Thank you.